But connection, for me, it's actually part of the things that I need to do every day to be at my best.
Welcome to another episode of Bigger Than the Hustle podcast, and I've got a super interesting character that has just passed on. It's like ships in the night we've crossed, and now we seem to be on a journey together. His name is Dave, but his title is Disco Dave. Now we can go into that a little bit in the conversation, but we were on intensive together about a month and a half ago, etc. And you know, he's given up his time during a delicate time of his life. Obviously, we'll talk about that as well. But to be with us today to share some wisdom and some light over this podcast. So I'm not going to introduce himself, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, hi, Dave.
Hello, my man. How you doing, Bhavik?
I'm doing really well. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over the microphone to you. If you can introduce yourself and what you're about, and then we can go into the conversation from there.
Awesome. Thanks, man. So, Disco Dave Wynn. I am the co-founder of a business leadership development company called Heart-Centered Leaders. The purpose of Heart-Centered Leaders is to make the world a happier and better place through us living into our values and helping other heart-centered humans live into theirs. We are looking to make the world a better place by essentially making better leaders or creating better leaders. One of my tools or roles is as a transformational coach. I've been working in this space for 3 years now. It is the best work I have ever done. It gives me my purpose. It's given me a sense of purpose. And after having years of doing what felt like the next thing all the time, I hadn't really discovered that thing. When I discovered coaching as being this tool for incredible transformational change, this felt like the answer to my prayers. This felt like the answer to the question, how do I help people and create fulfillment for myself every day? And it's been a magical adventure. And I use the word adventure purposefully because I find the word journey to be, if I only realized this recently, actually, I find the word journey to be a bit boring. Like, to me, journey, it's like A to B. It's like a linear path, whereas an adventure speaks to me in a way that, you know, it's about going into the unknown. It's about embracing that, embracing uncertainty, embracing the excitement that comes with that. And the fact that an adventure is very much unlinear. It's, you know, this way and that. And more recently, I say recently, I've been a DJ for 20 years. That for me is part of my joy. It's part of what makes me the kind of the high vibe guy that I am and can be. And right now I'm working on how to combine that with my coaching. So bringing music, presence, joy into coaching to create something that's really authentic and unique to me, but incredibly powerful and impactful in helping the people that I want to help, which from a Heart-Centered Leaders perspective is really people who are experiencing live leadership challenges, people who care, and if you don't mind me swearing,
No, that's fine.
Who give a shit about people, who care about helping people more than the job that they were an expert at before they moved into management and leadership. Whereas for my own one-to-one work, this has been something that's recently come to me, is that I want to help people that what I'm calling are the children of success.
Right.
So it's people who are like my favorite clients that I've worked with, that are maybe second generation entrepreneurs. They have come into a family business and they have a legacy that they feel like they have to live up to. And there's a burden that comes with that. Part of that means that they've often sacrificed parts of themselves in service of this legacy, in service of this business, and almost like a duty and responsibility to maintain and grow that legacy. But part of the struggle they face is that they deny a part of themselves, and also they struggle to find their own meaning and purpose because the expectations that they're living in, the heavy expectations that they carry with them. And what I've discovered through the work that I've done with people like that is that by helping them to discover their own natural gifts and talents, by helping them to trust, particularly in an entrepreneurial setting, because quite often they don't know how to lead, they manage, and they don't have the trust in those around them for things to get done without them being there. Mm-hmm. Part of the work that I've done is to help empower them, empower their people, which then creates the space for themselves to then discover their natural gifts, which then moves them into a place where they can discover new projects, which have this incredible benefit of actually helping the core business and elevating everything to new levels of success.
Wow. Now, what was really interesting when you explained that, it's so many layers, isn't it? There's so many layers to what you do, but the crux of it comes down to the individual, right? So the person that's gone into the business, like so you talk about legacies with coming in a second generation. Now, I can resonate with this a little bit because when I set up my business 21 years ago, which is home technology space, my dad was already in the technology space. So he had his own business doing his own thing. And when I entered it, I entered it with a friend of mine that I want to start. And one conscious decision I made is I want nothing to do with my dad's business. So I wanted to set it up as a completely separate entity. I wanted, even though I gained a lot of experience through his business, not working in it as such, but I'm helping him out on it. So that's why technology sat well with me. I was like, I don't want anything to do in terms of taking it on, taking his legs and moving that forward, because exactly what you said there, I had my own identity. I wanted to shape it with my own vision. And if that meant I did it well, I did it well. And if I didn't, I failed on my own, and I didn't want anyone to say, oh, you just took over your dad's business, because again, I knew I was worth more than that. I knew I had more in me than that. But my dad probably didn't agree. He probably is like, I could have done a better job than you. But again, I didn't want to have that conversation, and I didn't want him to feel that, like I knew that going through the education system and then setting up my own business, that I had my own energy to bring to it. And I almost would have felt a burden carrying his ideas and thoughts and then trying to shape mine, and then probably having loads of arguments on the way to try and move it forward, because he was very old school. He had his business already 25 years by that point, and I was just starting out. So I didn't want to take all that burden on. I wanted to just figure out myself, right? But I get it when, especially being from an Indian community, Indian family business is huge. A lot of people come from India, from Africa, take over or work within their own, their parents have set up a business, or their grandparents set up a business that's gone through generations. And I heard an interesting, I don't know if you can give some insight into this. And I heard an interesting story about the first generation that set up the business. So they've got the energy, the ideas. The second generation that maintain that business, that continue on their path. And the third generation can almost destroy it because they don't know where the energies come from to actually, they've not been through that. So what has been your experience in that respect?
That's a great question. I have to admit, it's been the second generation that I found myself working it with. Yeah. I've not really seen the third generation yet. And it's making me pause and reflect in the moment to think, where perhaps have I experienced that third generation? And I'm not sure I have. I think Aberdeen, where I live at the moment, is a really interesting place, because a lot of the people so I moved here 21 years ago, and Aberdeen as a city is full of what I would call these children of success, these second generation entrepreneurs, or second generation experiences of success. Because Aberdeen as a city, oil and gas came here in the late 70s, early 80s. That brought a huge amount of opportunity and created a lot of wealth and abundance. So a lot of businesses were founded, grown, scaled, sold. So a lot of people that I grew up with, particularly when I came here as a 18-year-old student, a lot of people that I worked with, partied with, had experiences with, they were very much that. And I've seen how, that can, I think people can go down a destructive path because they can't cope with the abundance of opportunity and it's overwhelming. But equally, they can also go down quite a driven path, I would say, where they take the drive and energy that they've experienced from their parent, but then what they tend to do is sacrifice themselves or sacrifice parts of themselves, sacrifice their energy, sacrifice relationships. And that isn't a sustainable way of growing, of living, of being. And that's where I found the work that I do is incredibly supportive, because it helps to shine a light on those issues, because often they're not even aware that there's a problem. As human beings, the way our brains work, we understand from neuroscience, our brain is always trying to protect us. Our brains don't allow us to see the problems, which is why, we can't generally, when it comes to doing the work on ourselves, it's very difficult to do that work on ourselves because we're almost too close to it. We can't see the stuff that we can't see. It's in our blind spots. So yeah, man, I have to admit, I don't think I've really seen that third generation yet. I really had an experience of it, to be honest.
Because it's interesting. We're talking about business here and obviously take over legacies, but I see a similar thing in terms of generations within this country. So I am second generation. So my dad, I'm first generation born. My parents came over as immigrants to the UK from India and Africa. My dad set up business, he set up a few businesses and stuff. And then I've come in as second generation, and then my kids now are third generation. But it's funny because the third generation, who are my children, because we're the bridging generation between the first generation that came. So we lived with them. We knew the stories. It's almost like the immigrant mindset. And I think it's a phenomenal mindset to have in terms of the way we do money, how we graft, how we work hard. We've seen it firsthand. With my parents, I saw what they did. But then we then try and cushion our kids so that they don't have to do that. I'm incredibly blessed to have the choices I have to live the life I have because of the sacrifices my parents made coming over here and just grafting to give us a better life. In inverted commas, better life, obviously, in that.
So relative, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because then that's been diluted in my children. So my kids are more the American brats, I'd say, more or less, it's almost like an entitled mentality. And I don't know whether we're over-parenting them and we're trying to manage it too much, but I try and still instill so many things that I had instilled in me, but my dad and mom instilled it by living it. We don't live it, we just tell them. And I think that's the dichotomy of what we're trying to do. But we'll see how it plays out. I'm not even sure where it's going to go to. But the funny thing is, Dave, I don't even see myself as a dad. Never mind, my daughter is 15 years old and my son is 10. Now, when I talk about parents, I talk about my parents. I see my mom and dad as like mom and dad. They never went to party and stuff. My dad worked. My mom was at home as a homemaker, like looked after us, fed us, clothed us, whatever it was. My dad went out to work, came back from work. We sat and had dinner, and that's the tradition, that traditional, like you probably know that tradition. Now, me as a dad, I like to go out and party with my mates. I like to go and watch football. I like to go on holiday and stuff like that, But then I like to be a dad as well. So I wear so many different hats. And then I think I still see myself sometimes think, so you're responsible for two lives that are coming into this one. So yeah, that's another conversation for a completely different day. Now, Dave, Do you know you were talking about connecting with yourself and trying to, especially from a business context, one thing I saw was the politics. So my dad employed his brothers at some points, and then when there was an issue in the business, that would spill over into social occasions where they would, there was no separation. My dad didn't get on with one of his brothers, and we felt that, we saw that, and again, that's another reason that I said, when I start my own business, I'm not employing anyone that's related to me, because I don't want that to deal with that. I'd rather someone work for me, we do our work, and then, but we still can be friends, but not in the family situation. So how do you give advice on that, if that's what you're seeing within the people that you're working with?
Well, I guess when it comes to coaching and using coaching as a tool, the nature of coaching is not to advise. My approach is more about holding that space for them, asking them powerful questions, helping them to see the things that they don't notice, so that they are moved to their own personal insights. Because the challenge that you face with an expert mind is that, because it was interesting, you said your dad, 25 years experience, you just starting out. I could see right there, your dad, he's the expert mindset. He will think, I know what to do. I know, I've got all this experience. I know what works for me. And what works for me, the assumption then that you can make as the expert is, what works for me is going to work for you. So I'm going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
So that's not my approach. If I see an opportunity where I feel like some advice might be useful, I'll offer it with permission, but I'm not going to place that burden on the other person, because that's really my agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's about giving them that space to come up with ideas themselves, because when you come from that inspired place, taking inspired action, that is incredibly energizing. Energy comes through you when you're inspired. When you're told to do something, and particularly, I hate being told what to do.
Really?
I really do not like being told what to do. Like I want someone, what helps me is having somebody who will listen to me, give me the space that I need to figure my shit out, to find my answers, because then that's me owning it. Someone's telling me what to do, then I'm not owning that. That's, and also what, that thing that they're telling me to do, that advice can be useful. There is a place for advice, but advice works from a specific set of circumstances at a specific point in time that, fundamentally could be very, very different to the experience that you're working in that moment. So I'm always very, very wary of giving anybody advice. And that's been a big shift in my own learning over the past few years, because I used to give people advice. That's how I used to help people, because I didn't know another way.
Yeah.
I've always had this energy to help others. Yeah. And the way I channeled it was from offering my agenda and saying things like, oh, well, have you tried this? Oh, this is what worked for me. That kind of stuff that we do when we're in advice mode. But boy, learning how to really communicate powerfully, how to powerfully listen, how to ask powerful questions that shift a person's perspective and helps them to see things in a different way is just incredible, and so much more supportive and helping people to figure out what they want and figure out what gets in the way of that.
And I think it's so true. When you have an insight yourself based on the question that someone's asked you, and something clicks, there's so much more gravitas to you moving in that direction than if someone just said, just do this. Because a lot of the time, like you said, advice comes from my own experience, my own knowledge, my own, I'm going to use the word you hate, journey, my own journey, right? But, it's the tools in my backpack, but those tools may not serve you. So therefore, asking questions is going to be more beneficial to helping you reach an insight than me just telling you what to do. Because again, telling someone what to do when a lot of the time we know what to do, but we just need the permission sometimes to do it, or the insight to actually see it for ourselves to move in that direction. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And also, an experience comes to mind where, so I was doing some consulting with a company that I retrained with. It was a coaching academy. And at the time, I remember, this is maybe 2 years ago, I remember speaking to the co-founder and saying, I've really noticed that the business could benefit from discovering repeatable processes that are going to support the business's ambitions. So I asked him, what are the repeatable processes that could be put into place? And it was interesting because at that time, he wasn't ready to hear that advice. It was actually 18 months later when he came to me and he'd started to really live into that question that he was then ready for it. So that's a really powerful lesson when it comes to advice, is that when we want to offer some advice, often people aren't even ready to hear it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And when that's the case and they're not ready to hear it, they don't hear it. They don't listen to what you're saying anyway. And almost that can go against you as well, can't it? Because when someone's not ready, it's like when, I think the saying, I'm going to butcher this, but I think the saying is, when the student is ready, the teachers turn up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah. But when he's not ready, the teacher can be there. Because a lot of time we look at our own lives and we see the teachers have always been there. We've just not heard them, or we've just not seen them, or been too stubborn to deal with it. It's only when we're at a moment of our life where we've closed our mouth and we start listening and taking things in that we realize that. I know that was for sure for me was 20 to 30, I was the king. I knew everything. I knew, this is when I set my business. I just knew that I'd be fine, and therefore, even though there was a lot of teachers around me, I didn't listen because I knew the answer. I had so much energy just to move, make mistakes, and just deal with them that I was fine. And only when everything crashed and burnt that I took a step back and I was like, this got me so far, but it's not going to get me any further. And then started listening and taking things in. And that was quite alien for me. Like you said, when you're in advice mode and then you have to be in question mode to try and change that, it's alien at the start, isn't it? Because your go-to is always, let me give some advice, But then it's like, that's not going to be helpful here. We need to change that. And that self-healing process for you, then if you have both, right, where you have the ability to question and the ability to give advice, that's way more powerful, isn't it then? And knowing when is when, as opposed to just knowing one way, which is that way, which is just asking or giving advice.
Yeah, spot on, man.
And I think that helps within our own partnerships as well, doesn't it? Like obviously being married and being in living with someone or whichever situation it is. I've learned that sometimes when someone is telling me, especially my wife, that when she's telling me something, my answer is, do you need me to respond or do you just need me to listen? Because sometimes you just need someone to listen. You don't want an answer. You don't want a response. You just want someone to hear you. And sometimes you want a discussion about it. And when someone gives you an opinion that you don't really want, you just want to share. That can be quite frustrating as well.
Right. That's such a great question. Do you need me to respond or do you need me to listen?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
And I think
I love that.
And it worked because then she's like, you're actually hearing what I'm saying now, and that was her language because I know this will be really hard for you to process, but she talks more than me. Yeah. And therefore,
I can imagine.
She has more airtime than I do. And, we joke about this and she'll even openly say, Bab is a man of few words. And she goes, then they said, judge by what? By you, everyone's such a small word. But it's that language of knowing who you're with and that person and knowing what makes them tick. It takes time. I know, I've been with my wife I don't know.
A while.
I've known her for 23 years and we've been married for 16 years, 17 years, 18 years, something like that. And it's only, I'd say, the last few years that we've really got to know each other. Like we've been through that pulling and shoving where you then now we've reached a middle ground where it's like, we get each other now. We've given each other space. I know what makes her tick. She knows what's mine tick. She knows I know when to leave her alone. She knows when to leave me alone. And she knows when to share. And she knows the things that I need work on, and I know what she does. And it's just, it's a nice space to be in. So anyone who's starting out marriage, I say, give it another 15 years, you'll be all right. So how's that with you? Like with your wife? What do you think works with you and what doesn't?
Well, we've been going through a relatively challenging period recently, I think because of all the work that I'm doing on me. I'm discovering aspects, or maybe rediscovering is a better word, actually, rediscovering aspects of myself. The experience that we were on with Rich Litvin was so powerful, and it really reconnected me with my authentic self. And now I'm working on how to integrate the whole me into everything that I'm creating. Part of the challenge we face is that my wife's a teacher. She is, in education, your path is pretty well defined. There's a lot of certainty there. You kind of know what the next steps are. Yeah. Whereas, as you know, in the entrepreneurial space, it is the complete opposite. It is messy. It is uncertain. It is testing, trying. It's figuring stuff out. It's seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And it's just this constant evolving process. And the uncertainty is the most challenging aspect. And for someone who is used to certainty, it's very difficult for them to then appreciate, that path that we need to go on to discover ultimately what it is that we want to create and what it is that works for us in service of the people that we want to serve.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That which is at the heart of it. That's why we go into business. It's to hopefully to create the life that we want, but also in service of the people that we love, in service of the people that are ultimately going to benefit from whatever it is that we're creating.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I suppose her being in education, like you said, it's a very linear route, isn't it? You sort of grow and you work, and incredibly tough business though to be in, being a teacher. I know a few teacher friends of mine that have now left the profession. They've said, if you want to really, make a difference to children in terms of being in front of them to shape them, teaching might be not the best space to be in because there's so many other things that are involved in teaching, especially the administration side, bringing work home. And, it's not the politics. Yeah. So many things. And it's so testing when all you want to do is just make a difference to a child's life, with all the other things that happen,
Yeah,
so,
we had a really good chat. I think, when was it? It was quite a few months ago now, because the thing we found difficult is, despite the fact that we've spent a lot more time at home together, it's been, I got busier, and it then became like that time for us to connect kind of got lost a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that's something we've had to reprioritize, is making that time for each other so that I can share where I'm at and give Jenny that sight of that, so that she can become comfortable, or as comfortable as she could ever be, with what it is that I'm creating. Because I've been in this for 3 years, and it's felt like that time has been really an educational process of me moving to the starting point, actually. I feel like where I'm at right now, it's like the metaphor I've been using is I've been laying the foundations of the launch pad. I've been, skilling up, tooling up. I've been creating experiences that have helped me to just really narrow in on, well, who is it that I want to help and how, so that the foundations of the launch pad have been made. I've pretty much made the rocket now. Now we're really just testing. And then it's going to be that spark of ignition and everything's going to take off. Like that's the kind of space that I feel like I'm living in right now.
Right.
And for my wife, she was, I think, probably hoping and maybe expecting that things would be further on than they might have been. And that's the challenge for her, like she wants us to be in a bigger house and, this stuff in life that she wants to be different. And I've had to kind of temper those expectations and say, well, we've still got a bit of a way to go, and that's okay. I think realistically in the next 1 to 3 years, we'll be in the place that I feel like is possible, and we will have the things in our life that we wanted to have. But now it's because I've done the work to answer these big questions, who are my people? How do I integrate my whole authentic self into everything that we're doing? Now I've answered those questions. I'm going out, I'm testing, I'm sharing this story because I've come from a place of knowing now. There's a lot of energy that comes from that place of knowing. And now it's just about connecting more of those people, creating powerful experiences for them. And then that is just going to open the door to my people coming in and me being able to create the impact that I want to create and create everything that I want to create, which is really exciting.
It is. And being in that space of creation, and this is the thing about being an entrepreneur, when we're in the mindset of creation, being productive, being outputting, we don't consume, we don't become we don't look at ourselves because everything's about how we, create, how we share. And I think it's anyone who's going through a tough time, especially with mental health, and I know, my daughter struggles a lot with that, is that when you're in the mode of creation, you don't look inward. There's no introspection these days because you're thinking about how can I share, how can I help? And I think it's such a huge place to be if we can stay in that space, because I think it can help us as people and in our own mental health, because we're not thinking about ourselves. We're not thinking about consuming what's good for me. How can I share? How can I create? How can I help? How can I be productive? I think it's such I've been in this space 21 years with different things, and all the time. And it's funny because, my wife, when we met, she's corporate. So she's working banking and things like that. So when she'd leave for work like 8 a.m. I'd still be sleeping. And then I'd get up and she'd ring me from my office and say, are you awake yet? Like at 9 o'clock. I'm like, because I worked late. So it's like, I'd get to work 10 and then I had one business 10 till 6 and then another business 6 till 2 in the morning. So, like that for the first 6 months of being married. So I don't know how we're still married, to be fair, but for the first 6 months we communicated by Post-it notes on doors and things like that, because she knew what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to build. And then she said, we can't carry this on like the way it is. But anyway, that changed. But it's then when we used to go away on holiday and stuff, I'd be like, okay, let me just send it. I just need to sort a couple of things out first and then I'll be good. So I'd, send some emails. I'd do a little bit of work and said, I'm good now. I'm fine. I've done that. And she'd be like, why can't you just leave your computer at home for a week and not do anything? I said, because it doesn't work like that. This thing doesn't work like that. It's always on. And when I think of something, if I don't do something with it, I'm not in a good space because I keep thinking about it. I just need to offload or whatever. And the funny thing was that she never got it. So the whole time it was always like a little bit of a battle, but she goes, she knew that's where I was. So he's like, okay, let me just let him deal with it for a bit. She never got it, but it'd be fine. And the funny thing is, over the last 8 years, so when she went on maternity, she left work, she looked after our children for 4 or 5 years. And then she goes, I want to set my own thing up. I don't want to go back to corporate. So she'd gone into fitness and nutrition for prenatal, postnatal women. Last 8 years, she's been on that path. And it's so funny now because she gets it now. So when we go away, she'll be like, oh, let me just send an email to this and let me do this. And I go, do you remember when I used to do this? And now I'm 20 years down the line, I don't need to do this. You're starting, So I said, unless someone's been in that space, you don't get it. And that's the thing. And that me talking to you as an entrepreneur, I get you because I can see how your brain works. And I'm like, I see that so much. There's so many similarities with the way you is. And I'm sure even during this conversation, you're already thinking of 5 other things that I could do this and I could do that. And it is that. And for all its sins, because I know I've been watching TV and I'm like, she has a good idea. How can I integrate that into what I'm doing? And I'm like, well, just switch off, just watch the movie, and that's it. It's done, right? And I'm like, boy, you just had a good idea, and that's a great idea. So yeah. I that thing about staying on all the time, switching off. Luckily now I'm in a better space, but that's 21 years down the line, bro. So that's a wild time.
I know, but I have to admit, I feel like, because I've invested so much in myself this last few years, that I've learned a lot of these lessons. I mean, it goes way back beyond that, because there's a huge amount of learning that I've taken in the work that I've done from going right the way back.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like what you're speaking about, there is, it's those open loops. There's a phenomenon called open loops.
Okay.
So in your mind, when you've got open loops, it's basically unresolved thoughts.
Yeah.
The more open loops you have in your mind, the more that then drains your energy, because you just keep thinking about them, which is why it's important that when you have an idea like that, when you feel inspired, finding a place to capture that means that then you're getting out of it. Like and this is all tied into mindfulness. Like I trained in mindfulness at the beginning of last year. In fact, I've been practicing it for the last few years. It's been part of my journey. And being able to slow down, clear the space in your head, whether it's from just doing some conscious breathing, meditation, I get it from running, I get it from being in the shower, like in that space. Ends up being quite an inspirational space, because the space is cleared, the thinking brain is rested, and that opens up the subconscious, and that then is where that inspiration comes from. Ideas then come forth. But having or creating a habit out of being able to capture ideas, like I've got I use my phone actually. I use the Notes app in here. Mm-hmm. I've got a page which is content ideas. So whenever I think of an idea or an experience, I'll write it down to get it out of my head. I've got one that I haven't used for a while called the Lightbulb book, which is similar, where it's maybe a brand new business idea or an idea for something that I can integrate into the work that I do. But I've made sure that I use this as my place for when inspiration comes, that I know this is the place that I go to get it out of my head. So then it just doesn't cause this open loop, which then ends up draining your energy, because that's really what we're trying to avoid is having ideas and stuff that just take away our presence, really. Mm. And that, as a parent, as a leader, as people who have been working from home, it doesn't, in fact, if we're interacting with people that we care about or people that we're serving, the biggest gift that we can give them is our presence and our attention. And I had a really powerful lesson in 2017 where I was in London for a wedding. I got absolutely smashed. It was like, it was me, no wife, no kids. And it was just like, it was a Scottish, Turkish wedding. It was an incredible party. But I got so smashed that I fell asleep in the street between the venue and the hotel. And I'm wearing a full kilt outfit and I got robbed. Like literally, someone took my phone off me, someone took my Apple Watch. And it was the first time in my adult life that I hadn't had a phone, Yeah. I think I'd had a phone from the age of 16 and I'm 40 now. I was 40 2 weeks ago. But at that time, I'd never broken a phone, lost a phone, not had a phone. And the magical thing that happened in that 3 weeks where I didn't have a phone was it shone a light on all the bad habits that I'd grown up with having this device. It was robbing me of my attention and my presence because of all the notifications. It was just distracting me all the time. And at the time, our eldest daughter, Emily, was 1. And I suddenly became aware that, when it was just me and her, I was reaching for my phone all the time. I wasn't really with her. Mm. And that made me, I was horrified by that. I thought, fucking hell, I need to change. I need to shift my habits. I need to take control. Mm. And that was a really, really powerful moment of realization that helped me to appreciate the value of presence, the gift that it is, and prioritizing it. And that's where like mindfulness meditation has been such a wonderful practice, because it's helped me to be more present. It's helped me to be less distracted. It's given me a practice of being able to take ideas and put them in a place that I can use them rather than just let them go. And that's been that's been a fundamental part of my own personal transformation.
And it's really important, like when you've been through that process, that you realize the importance, so you continue, because it is a practice, isn't it? It's a journey. It's a way that we have to almost keep reminding ourselves that we are, until it becomes a habit, unconscious habit that we just do automatically. Because I remember going through my darkest times, 12 to 14 years ago. I went to the Buddhist center on a Monday night because someone said, why don't you look at meditation? And I was like, I don't know what that is, but anyway, let me just go. And then they do mindful practices, mindful speaking, and then doing some meditation stuff. And he goes, this is a practice. This isn't something you're just going to get. You just have to sit down and do the work, like anything, like, training, whatever it is. And I think single-handedly, I say that's one thing that has helped me the most in my life, in terms of giving me that ability to create space, because I felt very congested with life at that moment, which was creating space in my mind from, everything that was going on, the unreal things that we built up in our own minds. But two things, which was creating that space, but giving me that second before I react to something. So I changed that reaction to a response. Yeah. And those two things, I think, have been the most awesome things for me to create this space and the life of it's like reflective, where I can continuously see things in moments and not be shaken by them, and saying this will pass, whatever it is, it will pass, and having perceived negative things that happen and say, this is happening for me, it's not happening to me. And therefore there has to be an outcome that's beneficial, even though I don't see it. So I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to let it be and just, let it sit with me. So 100% that the contemplative mind and thought process has helped me hugely as well. Now it's a couple of...
Can I just add something quickly? Just a quick thought. So there's a phrase that comes to mind that I love when it comes to the process of becoming more self-aware and practicing self-awareness, practicing mindfulness. It's moving yourself, or helping the people that you work with, move from a place where they reflect on their actions to being able to reflect in action.
Yeah. So while it's happening, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because in that space, then you can make better choices.
Okay.
When you can give yourself permission to slow down, to pause, to not react, then you open up that space, that reflective space, to become aware of all the choices that you have in that moment, rather than that automatic reaction that comes from feeling in that moment, but which is driven by a thought. So the thing happens to you, there's an automatic thought that leads to an automatic feeling, and then an automatic reaction.
Yes. Yeah. Get that. So therefore you're in control, and therefore it's more of a measured outcome as opposed to a reactive outcome and stuff. No, I fully agree with that. So thank you for sharing that. Now, there's a couple of things, Dave. This conversation can last hours. I know that. So, so what I'd like to do is ask you a couple more questions, which just tap into the way you think as well. Now, we're going to fast forward 100 years into the future, where you're at the last moments of your life. Now, you don't have enough energy to speak, but you have enough energy to write down 3 words. Now, these 3 words have resonated with you all your life. I hope by sharing them, it'll resonate with the people that are listening as well. What would those 3 words be for you, and why?
Joy, love, connection. For me, joy is part of my own gift. I know that when I'm enjoying myself, I give other people permission to enjoy themselves too. And I think many people struggle with that, just to enjoy themselves and where they're at and what they're doing. I know it's part of my gift. because of my experiences, particularly in a DJing setting, but also in the work that I do. So joy is such a big part of who I am, and a part of who we all are and what's possible. I think joy also ties into, when you're in a joyful state, you can't be feeling negative. You can't be thinking negative thoughts. There's so much that's possible through joy and that joyful energy. Love is how we're brought into this world. Hopefully for most of us, and not everyone is, but when we come into this world as full of potential, optimism, we are love at that point, and presence is love. Love is expansive. There's so much that's possible through love, and I love the question: what would love do? If you're ever stuck or ever got a big decision to make, or you feel like you're on the verge of doing something that is not supportive of you and those around you and what you wish to create, asking yourself the question, what would love do? Is so powerful.
Yeah. And seeing it as an embodiment of someone that would make a decision. And I think that's a really good way of seeing it. But it's reminding yourself as well, isn't it, that how to think in that way. So thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. I'm going to actually write that one down, actually.
Thanks. And connection, the last word. We're, as human beings, we're all born to connect. There's a guy called Matt Lieberman who wrote a book called Social, and he speaks about how our brains we're all wired to connect. But connection is not, for me, it's actually part of the things that I need to do every day to be at my best. Having meaningful connections with other human beings, deep and powerful connections, connection with myself, my authentic self. Because as we grow up, we lose part of our authentic self, or it's easy to lose part of our authentic self because of fear, and fear can get in the way of that. But connecting with our authentic selves, that's, again, I think, that path to joy, fulfillment, happiness, and what's best in life, and enables us to then live life fully.
And we are in this symbiotic system called the universe. This is how we are, isn't it? As human beings, there might be all these things that try and separate us, media, internet, etc. But we are closer than we think, and we are all connected to one system, right? And that's the beauty of how we are. And I think the more we see that, the more we realize that we're all in this together, whatever this thing is. So thank you again for highlighting that. Now, this podcast is called Bigger Than the Hustle, and right now you're bigger than the world. So I've got a microphone that's connected up to 7.58 billion people on this planet. They can all hear you. They're all conscious. They're all awake. There's no language barrier, and they can all understand what you're saying. If I can hand this over to you for the next 30 seconds, what would your message be to the world?
Fear is robbing you of opportunities. The quicker you understand that, the quicker you get out of your own way, do the work to get out of your own way, which can be very difficult to do, but finding people that you trust to be open about the challenges that you face and help you to connect with what you want, that will give you the space and time that you need to explore that, that will change your life.
Yeah. Period. And I think, and I everything you said there resonates so deep, because I know that's true, right? And that's your truth, and that's what you're living as well. So at this juncture, Dave, I'd really like to thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for giving us your wisdom and your insights into everything we've talked about. Like I said, these kind of conversations always, light me up. And even though, you're sharing your wisdom, I know I get so much out of this just from being in your space. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for the way you turn up in the world. Thank you for the things that you're building, because I know your aim is to have an impact, and to have an impact for a long time, not just create something and then create something again. So any help that you want or any help you need from me, please reach out. And likewise, we still have to get on the connection call and talk about things as well. So we'll make that happen as well. Is there anything else you'd like to say just before we go?
Just that, this is an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be able to connect, to share my story. It is a privilege and a pleasure to do the work that I do every day, to create the life that I wish to create for myself, for my family, for the people that I get the privilege to work with. Thank you, my man. I really appreciate this.
No worries at all. So just before we go, just leave you with a few thoughts. I'm Bhavik Patel. I'm the host of the podcast. And big energy leads to big thoughts. Big thoughts lead to big ideas. Big ideas lead to big actions. And big actions lead to a big life. So keep thinking big. Until next week, goodbye.